Very good morning to all. It is our great pleasure to welcome you all to the Knowledge 4.0 webinar series, which is one of the unique and distinct initiative of Chennai Institute of Technology. It is our great pleasure to conduct this type of programs for enhancing the knowledge of faculty, researchers, and students community. Under Knowledge 4.0 webinar series, we have been conducting webinars such as Technical Webinar Series, Research Webinar Series, Innovative Talk Webinar Series, and Career Guidance Webinar Series. Along with this webinar series, we are also conducting national seminars, international seminars, national conferences, international conferences, and faculty development programs. These initiatives are purely conducted to enhance the knowledge of faculty members, researchers, and students community. These initiatives are being successful in different scenario under the motivation of our Honorable Chairman, P. Sri Ram, who is one of the first generation successful entrepreneur, Managing Director of MK Group of Companies. Today, we have Dr. S. Arul Daniel, Professor HAG from National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli, with us to deliver the lecture on future electric grids. Sir is one of the excellent resources. So I feel very happy to share that I was working under him as a faculty in National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli, when he was the Dean Academic. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the particular forum, sir. Chennai Institute of Technology was established in the year 2010 by our Honorable Chairman, Sri P. Sri Ram. Today, our institute is being within top 10 among all other private engineering colleges in Tamil Nadu. Chennai Institute of Technology follows unique teaching learning process, which has made us to establish more than 15 centers of excellence inside the campus. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you all the participants. And today I expect Dr. S. Arul Daniel sir. And now I request Ms. Swapna Sri to introduce our today expert, Dr. S. Arul Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. Myself, Swapna Sai, pursuing second year in Chennai Institute of Technology. Today is our expert, Dr. S. Arul Daniel. Dr. S. Arul Daniel completed his BE degree program from the Government College of Technology, Coimbatore in 1988, and ME degree in Power Systems from the Regional Engineering College, Trichy in 1991. He completed his PhD degree in Electrical Engineering at the Regional Engineering College, Trichy in 2003. He joined the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering of Regional Engineering College, Trichy in the year 1989 as a research assistant and as a lecturer in 1994. Subsequent to promotions as senior lecturer in the year 1999, assistant professor in the year 2004, associate professor in the year 2007. He is currently a professor, higher administrative grade in the EEE department. He served as associate dean, head of the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, head of the Department of Instrumentation and Control Engineering, and dean academics at NIT Trichy. He has published 22 papers in reputed international journals with high impact factors and presented 18 papers in international and national conferences. His research interest includes distributed generators, microgrids, power electronic interfaces for renewable energy systems. He has completed 2 MHRD sponsored projects. He has guided 9 successful PhD scholars and also guiding PhD scholars presently. He has concluded short-term courses in distributed generation, integrated wind solar power systems, and microgrid. He has visited foreign countries like Manchester in UK, Singapore, and Israel. He has worked as British Council Study Fellow for Indo-UK REC project. We welcome you, sir.
Welcome you, sir. Please, you can go out of your session, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor of Mechanical and my former colleague who is organizing the event, and the student representative, Swapna, who's chairing the session. I think it's my privilege to share a few thoughts about the future of electricity grids. See, there are major disruptors that take place in our society which change the course of our whole life. You're aware that COVID seems to be a major disruptor. Otherwise, we will not have a webinar like this where we have interaction with one another through online lectures. I'm glad that so many of you have joined this webinar. And I am told by my former colleague that a series of lectures, more than 100, had taken place during this lockdown time. So CIT had made the best use of COVID disruption to promote technological interventions in learning. So all the best to each one of you here. Now, as far as this topic is concerned, you know that power systems is a very complex man-made entity. So you have interaction with so many other systems. You know that a thermal plant requires turbine, and then a hydro plant requires a dam. So you need civil engineering, you need mechanical engineering, and the control of each of the power plants is so complex that you need electronic systems for various control actions. And then these days there is a emphasis on using storage. So chemical systems have also come into the electrical system. Now SCADA is an important component of power system, supervisory control and data acquisition, and also machine intelligence for planning the demand. So computer networks and data communication play a significant role in power system. So it's an interplay of various systems. So you name any development that is taking place in the technological front, you have an application in power systems. Now, if you take a look at the growth of power sector in India, I'm sure most of the EEE guys would know these statistics. It was just 1.3 gigawatt, and now it is more than 300 times. The growth is more than 300 times. So the installed capacity now is nearly 371,000 megawatt. So from 1,362 megawatt, the installed capacity of all the generators now is 371 megawatts. So that's the exponential growth as far as the power system is concerned. Significant growth which we can never think about. Nearly a huge exponential growth. Now, if we take a look at the Electricity Act when we got independence and the Electricity Act that is in force now, there are a lot of changes that had taken place. When we became independent in 1947, the Electricity Act at that time, I think it was made an act in 1950. The act thought about state electricity boards. So each state had its own board, Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, TNEB. Andhra Pradesh State Electricity Board, and then Kerala State Electricity Board. Each state had its own electricity board. And power generation was a state subject, or in other words, the central government or the federal government really didn't bother about adding generation capacity. But in 1976, the central government came up with an amendment to the act, and they started putting up their own plans. So agencies like the National Thermal Power Corporation, National Hydropower Corporation, Nuclear Power Corporation came into being, and a lot of central sector stations were put up. Say, for example, Kalpakkam in Chennai is a central generating station. So each of these central generating stations is supposed to supply power to the state in which it is put, and it is also supposed to supply power to the neighboring states. And initially the division was 20-80, 20%, around 20% of the power generated would go to the state in which it is put, and the remaining 80% would be shared with the neighboring states. Ramakundam is another example where NTPC had put up its plant. Kalpakkam is a nuclear power plant. When they started putting up central plants, then you have to interconnect the states. So Southern grid came into being, and then Northern grid came into being, Western grid came into being. So regional grids started coming up, and each of these regional grid had its own load dispatch centers. So it was more of a behemoth, a huge system. And they worked towards a national grid, and then they worked towards a SARC grid. And you know the reason for these interconnections. These interconnections would help us to level the demand. In other words, when there is excess generation, it is supplied to a place where there is a demand. And when there is a lesser generation in the region, power is imported into that region. So it all depends upon whether there is an excess generation or lesser generation in the locality, so that power is imported or exported. So tie line sharing became the norm. So this also helped in reducing the spinning reserve. So you don't need to worry about your reserve capacity in the state grid, because whenever there is a demand, increase in demand, it is met by excess generation in some region in that whole national grid or SARC grid. Now, with all this growth, the demand keeps escalating, and that's the reason why from 1362 megawatt we have moved to 371,000 megawatts. Demand keeps increasing. So next year, the installed capacity will not be 371,000 megawatt. It will be much more. So to keep growing. So that's the important thing that we need to keep in mind. The demand keeps growing, and there is always a mismatch between generation and demand. So in order to meet this growing demand, a lot of changes started happening in the power sector. So we'll skip this slide, and then we'll move on to a recent disruptor to the power sector. And this disruptor would form the basis for the future electricity network or electric grids. Number one, there is always a growing demand for transportation. Similar to the growth in power sector, the need for transportation keeps increasing. Of course, COVID had brought down that demand for transportation has come down forcibly. Even air travel has come down. The road surface transport has come down. The highways are not as congested as it was earlier. But still, the moment the lockdown is released and normalcy returns, there is going to be a spurt in the demand for transportation. The sales of passenger cars, though it has come down now, will again pick up. Automobile industry will boom. So once again, the need for passenger cars would increase. Now, the legislation or the government always enforces two things. One is that the number of kilometers per liter petrol or diesel that you can drive will go on increasing. Now let's say that now the present would be 24 kilometers per liter, let us say, roughly around that, in standard test conditions. So this would go on increasing. And then the vehicle emissions, what comes out of the exhaust. And you know that present day cars make use of IC engines predominantly. Not many electric vehicles have hit the road. So when you use IC engines, the exhaust has COx, NOx, SOx gases. So that has to be brought down. So the volume or the ppm, parts per million, of these COx, NOx, SOx gases from the exhaust has to come down. So these two imperatives on the manufacturers of automobiles would make the cost per vehicle to go up. Recently, we switched over from BS4 to BS6, and the manufacturer said that will escalate the cost. So whenever vehicle emissions need to be brought down, the technological interventions increase or escalate the cost. Same is true with fuel economy. Now we know that SOx, NOx gases add up to pollution and global warming. So the car manufacturers, they came out with what's called as hybrid cars. So hybrid cars are the cars which has battery bank and it is driven by both electric motors and IC engines. Now these hybrid cars, I'll skip all this. These hybrid cars will improve the fuel efficiency. If you look at the conventional car, if you have 100% of energy in the fuel, only 12.6% go to the train, or in other words, to the axle. So the remaining nearly 87% is wasted. So you have engine losses, heat losses amounting to 62%, idling losses about 17%, driveline losses about 18%, and so on. So finally, what is used? If you burn 100 liters of petrol, only 12.6 liters is used in the real driving, or it's just 12.6 liters required for the actual movement of the vehicle. The rest go as waste. You can see that any thermal cycle is not efficient. You can't go beyond, let's say, 40%. So that's the whole problem. Problem of a conventional IC engine-based vehicles. The situation changes when you go for hybrid vehicles. Say, for example, you stop the vehicle at a red in a junction, at a red signal in the junction. The engine is turned off. Now, suppose if it is a conventional engine, then you have to crank the shaft and start it all over again. And suppose you are driving at a lower speed, you know that at lower speeds, at lower gear, the wastage is much higher. Efficiency is poorer. Efficiency is poorer in that situation. So think of these two stages when you want to stop the vehicle and when you want to drive it at lower speed. And the third is when you drive the vehicle downhill or uphill. Again, when you drive the vehicle downhill, you may not need to burn as much oil as you do when you drive uphill. So what do you do when you have energy at your disposal? Because the vehicle can run freely all by itself, it is downhill. So you can make use of that energy. So in all these situations, hybrid engines or hybrid vehicles help. When you stop and start, make use of electric motor. At lower speed, drive it using electric motor, improve the efficiency. When it is downhill, you allow a free fall and then drive the motor as generator and feed the energy back into the batteries. Same is true when you apply brakes. Regenerative braking is possible. And when vehicle is going uphill, you can still use both the drives, the electric motor and the IC engine, and drive it at its optimum efficiency point. The IC engine can be made smaller because of electric motor assistance. So I think this side skipped. I've already explained this. Now, when you go for hybrid vehicles, the gear arrangement has to be entirely different. So they make use of what is called as planetary gear system. Similar to our planet system, you have planets revolving around the sun. So here you have gears running around a main gear. The advantage of such a planetary gear system, you can see a lot of videos on the YouTube about planetary gear mechanism. The advantage of planetary gear mechanism is that you can drive any gear with any drive. So you can drive it with an IC engine. One gear can be driven with an IC engine, other can be driven with a electric motor, and then finally through the central gear it is fed to the main axle. So that's the advantage. So hybrid vehicles require such planetary gear mechanism. So I'll stop with this about hybrid vehicles. So Chevrolet has come out with its own version, and then Toyota has come out with its own version. So you have number of car manufacturers who have come out with plug-in hybrid vehicles. Now, when these hybrid vehicles hit the road, the impact is seen in the power systems. So that's the reason behind the change in the way conventional power plants work. Back to 70s, due to oil crisis, a lot of renewable sources were connected. So the power flow was not unidirectional, it was multi-directional. So prior to 70s, the power system was unidirectional in the sense you had a common power pool, which you call the generation system. And then from the power pool, all the generated electricity is transmitted through a transmission network. And then from the transmission network to the distribution network down to domestic customers. There were also high tension customers, medium tension customers, and so on. So power was always flowing from the generation system to the distribution system. Now with renewable penetration, power started flowing from the distribution network to the transmission network. So a lot of wind generators, solar plants, small hydro plants, and whatever power that you can harness from various sources was fed to the distribution network. Now with the hybrid cars, charging of batteries became an important issue. Now some of the batteries are of very high capacity. It could be able to store, let's say, about 30 kilowatt hour. So how do you ensure that it is quickly charged? So charging of these batteries require power from the distribution network. So you need sockets which supply current up to 30 amperes or more. So if you want fast charging, you need higher amperage. Now, if all these cars are replaced by hybrid cars, and think about each household having a charger, then it would play havoc on the distribution transformer, because everybody, if they start charging their car batteries at a particular time, the distribution transformer would be overloaded. So you have to devise some mechanism so that the batteries are charged, as well as the existing network need not be replaced. Because if you want to allow all the cars to be charged at the same time, you need to change the megawatt or MVA capacity, megavolt ampere capacity of the transformer. And then the distribution lines have to be changed. You have to replace the conductors with a conductor of larger radius. So all this is going to be very expensive. So they thought that the communication and computer network should be made use of in deciding when a particular car battery can be allowed to charge. So that's the whole idea behind smart grids. Smart grid is to ensure that all the nodes are controlled centrally. This is the whole concept of smart grid, where you have plug-in electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid, and then you also have efficient appliances. Like here you see a smart lighting system, then you have solar panels, and then there is a whole sophisticated control to manage the whole energy, and so on. So this is to make sure that the distribution lines do not exceed the thermal limits, as well as the transformer's MVA rating is not exceeded. So you have, as I've just zoomed, this is taken from IEEE Spectrum. You'll find each household having smart appliances, an energy management system, and generation, household generation. Now, charge regulations can be self-regulating, or you can make use of a charge regulator. Now, small microcontrollers, which are very cheap, can be utilized to develop a charge regulator as well as to control these generations. So a simple microcontroller or the available processor can be programmed to be an energy management system so that control is possible as well as charge regulation is possible for the batteries. So a typical system could be you have a PV battery bank with charge regulation. The battery is overcharged. Open the relay so that it's no longer charged. If it is deeply discharged, remove the battery so that it gets charged. When you use PV, you know that you have to operate the PV panel or PV array at the need point for maximum power extraction. So you can use these controllers for maximum power point tracking also. Now these sources can also be connected to the network. It need not be always autonomous. It can be connected to the utility grid distribution network as it's the normal case. So in such a scenario, say for example, you operate the PMSG driven by a wind turbine at its optimal power point and keep feeding power to the utility network. So you need a grid side inverter, which is normally a current controlled voltage source inverter. Now when it is a hybrid system, you have a PV array. So at the PV array point, through this converter, a boost converter, you make sure that PV array is at its knee point. So you have maximum current injected into the grid. So in such domestic power supplies, which are there in residential premises, THD is an important factor. So there are statutory requirements so that the THD of the voltage waveform that you feed, as well as if there's a current control, the current harmonics that you feed are always within the limits. I'll skip this also. So this is another case where you make use of a wind-driven induction generator with a PV array. So you have a PV array here, and this inverter converts this DC voltage into AC voltage, and this forms the local grid to which the induction generator is coupled. So these are some of the waveforms. Of course, you can use sophisticated switching mechanism to make sure that the waveforms are nearly sinusoidal. We can include a battery bank here, in which case you may a battery bank here. So in which case you have to use a DC-DC converter for extracting maximum power from the PV array. Now, in addition to these AC sources, these days, a lot of emphasis is being given to DC sources and DC loads. The advantage of using DC loads is that it is efficient. So in this case, it's a purely AC system and the loads are DC, so you have to convert AC to DC. So whenever you use a solar panel and an inverter, the inverter has its own switching losses. And then when you convert it back to DC, there are losses. So all these losses can be removed if you make use of a DC nanogrid with DC loads. So when you have a DC supply system within your house, you can straight away use it for EV charging and for powering all your appliances. So these days you have DC fans made up of permanent magnet DC motor. You have DC refrigerators. So all these loads have been converted to DC, going back to Edison days. so that you don't need an in-between AC-DC converter. So this improves the efficiency. The other concept I'm sure you would have come across is that with these renewable sources or embedded sources, or what they call dispersed sources, embedded sources because it is embedded into the distribution network, dispersed sources because these sources are dispersed around the entire system. It's not like say Kalpakam plant, Ennur plant. Every household has a plant. So in such a scenario, you can always think of a net zero energy operation. Some of the states in the world, the government had passed in legislation stating that any building that comes up should have net zero energy operation, which means if they import energy from the grid, they should export the same energy back to the grid. So imported energy from the grid minus exported energy to the grid should be zero. So net zero energy operation will be enforced in the future, though in India we have not done much progress in these aspects. In due course, all these things would come up. A typical example is Bangalore City. Bangalore City, I think about 2 decades back, they said that every household should have solar water heater. So that's mandatory. If they build a house, they should always have a solar water heater. So that electric geyser or electric water heater is dispensed with. Similarly, in due course, they will enforce that every household should have its own rooftop PVs and should ensure net zero energy operation. Even if it is not household operation, it could be an apartment operation or a colony operation in which a particular colony or a gated community should make sure that the net energy is zero. And finally, I think this would be my last slide, and then we'll move on to some question and answers if you have. Now, when you have net zero energy operation or when you have embedded generation in your household, then there is every possibility that during some point of time in your locality, you have excess power. So that excess power is exported to the distribution network and you can get money out of it. So when you have rooftop PVs all around your country, and when they generate power and when you have excess power being fed to the network, a given locality can be thought of as a virtual power plant. So this virtual power plant can supply power to the utility network, your distribution network, or it can import power from the distribution network. So the whole lot of trading and auctioning would pick up, and every household or a group of households can become an enterprise wherein they can export power and get money. And the other concept based on this is that you can have colonies which act as peers. So each colony would be a peer, and then peer-to-peer exchange of power is also possible. So you can say, okay, I have excess power, you can take it from me. So internal selling and buying, or in other words, energy cooperative is also being talked about, and in some parts of the world, energy cooperatives have already been implemented. Now this blockchain and then all your cryptocurrencies will play a significant role in this buying and selling of power between peers. So with this, I would stop my talk, and I'm open to questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. So it was very highly easily understandable, and we got so many live messages there. So they are getting a lot of information from this presentation. So thank you so much once again for coming and presenting a very good content that is very highly needed in the current scenario. So you have touched all the aspects, electric vehicles and how they're going to be used, and what are the power generations. So many information have been fed to the participants. I hope this will be highly useful to the participants. It will help them to enhance their knowledge, and it will help them to go for the research in the electric grids. And thank you so much, sir. Let me request Swapna to ask the question.
The question is asked by Maheshwari, sir. If net energy is zero, is it possible to implement? If net energy zero home is implemented, what will be the cost of power from grid?
No, the whole dynamics of pricing would change. So instead of calling yourself a consumer, you have to call yourself a prosumer. So you produce electricity as well as you consume electricity. So you become a prosumer. In such a scenario, the import cost and export cost will differ. I think at the moment, initially the export cost was higher, but now I think the export cost is slightly lesser. And the whole pricing, it's not like what it is today, where you pay for a unit and it is constant, somewhere between 4 rupees to 6 rupees per kilowatt hour unit. Now, when you become a prosumer and your neighborhood has a lot of prosumers, the pricing is going to be dynamic. In many parts of the world, they have availability-based tariff, time of the day tariff. So the tariff is going to be dynamic. So at times it is going to be high, at times it is going to be low. So you have to manage your load so that when it is high, you can export power. When it is, when the cost is high, you export power. When the cost is less, cost per unit is less, you import power. So you have to schedule your battery charging depending upon the time of the day. I hope I have answered that question.
Thank you, sir. The next question by Ketan Chakravarti. Why can't all heavy trucks can be totally converted into electrical vehicle?
Yeah, fine. See, that's the goal of the government. The government had said by I think 2030, all IC engines to be replaced by electric vehicles. But we have to be realistic, and I think hybrid electric vehicles would be better than a pure 100% electric vehicle.
Thank you for your explanation, sir. The next question by Dr. Dhanlakshmi. What are the charging methods are available in electrical vehicle?
Now, recently there was an advertisement for any citizen to ask for a license to put up a charging station, and they have given specifications. You may have to get a 11 kV line, and then have this much area, and then have series of battery chargers. Now, basically, a charger is nothing but a DC source. So if you draw power from the grid, you have to convert AC to DC using your conventional converters. a three-phase bridge rectifier or a three-phase control rectifier is required. Or you have to use solar and directly charge the vehicles, the batteries. Israel has a network of these charging stations. And I'm sure in the future, India also will have a network of charging stations. If you are an entrepreneur, the best option would be, instead of putting your money in a petrol bunk, put it in an electric charging station. Though it may not give you money now, in the future, when you have a lot of hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles on the road, you'll get good money. Having said that, you should also note that in many parts of the world, even the parking has charging stations. When you have a car park, let's say you go to some of the big malls in Chennai, I don't remember many. There you park your car and then you have a charging station, and you can have the car charged by paying money. So the whole business scenario, as far as power sector is concerned, is going to change. It has already changed in many parts of the world. It will change in India too. I hope I have answered Dr. Dhanalakshmi.
Yeah, sir. Thank you for sharing your views on it. The next question by Gautam Kumar. Is it possible to establish DC grid with the current existing AC distribution network?
It's already there. Many of the rural electrification has DC grids. L&T had already started putting up DC grids. IIT Madras, Ashok Jhunjhunwala, Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala had already put up a lot of DC nano grids. So it's already there. Now the interface, suppose if you have a DC nano grid and if you have all your appliances converted to DC and you have rooftop PV, you have an interface at the entrance or at the point of common coupling where you have an inverter. So if you have excess power, you feed it to the network and get money out of it. Rural electrification by L&T and by what Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala is doing is purely DC nanogrids.
Thank you, sir.
I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you, sir. The next question by Brinda Ramasubramanian. Nanotechnology nowadays has increasing potential in solar panels. Is they cause a big difference when compared to commercial solar cells available in market?
See, not only nanotechnology, organic cells are on the way, and then they have solar paints and so on and so forth. A lot of research is going on to improve the efficiency of solar panels. So commercial panels have an efficiency of just about 15%. So compared to what is the energy in the solar irradiation and what you get out of the panel, the efficiency is just 15%. 100 watts per meter squared will not result in 100 watts at the terminals of the PV panel. So the efficiency is 15%. So a lot of work is being done, and let's see whether they are able to improve, because even if there is an improvement of 2%, 3%, then it has a significant output as far as these panels are concerned. And the money that you get back on your investments are concerned.
Thank you, sir. The next question by Dr. Bhagavati Perumal. Solar energy is need of the day. What is your comment for its implementation and development, sir?
No, I think in the future, as I was mentioning, government might come out with a legislation that every new building should have rooftop panels. So if you build a building, they would ensure that you have local sources within the building. in some of the countries, the facade or the material for architecture is all solar panels. So it's a matter of time. It's made mandatory in India. But what we are doing in India is that we have a lot of huge centralized solar plants instead of embedded or dispersed solar plants. Centralized solar generation had picked up recently in Karnataka. They have opened up a huge solar plant. I forgot the capacity. I think it's to the tune of close to 1 gigawatt. And in Tamil Nadu, they had put an 800 megawatt plant. So centralized plants, solar plants are coming out. But in the future, buildings would also have solar plants. Every household will have their own rooftop PVs.
Thank you, sir. The next question. How is the efficiency and lifelong of an electrical vehicle?
See, you must know that I think a huge number of parts. I must request my mechanical colleague to correct me. I think to the tune of 3,000 parts would vanish when you convert a conventional car to an electric car. So a lot of parts would be thrown away. And then, you know, the drive, since it is a motor, it's a pure electric vehicle, it's a motor. You don't need a gear train. Speed control is through an inverter. Inverter is static, whereas gear is dynamic, it has to rotate. So the number of moving components is also going to come down. So naturally, the electric vehicle is going to last longer. But then, nevertheless, I must say that the batteries need to be replaced quite often. That's the only problem with the electric vehicle. You need to replace the batteries. And how long you can use the battery depends upon the distance that you drive or the number of charging cycles the batteries are put forward. So if it's subjected to more charging cycles, life would come down because the life is specified in terms of number of charging cycles. But otherwise, maintenance is much easier with an electric vehicle than with a conventional IC engine-based car.
Yes, sir. Nicely explained. Swapna, next question.
Okay, sir. The next question by Vimla. What may be the roles of other branch engineers in the field of grid and its related technology?
In the field of?
In the field of grid and its
in the field of
related
grid.
technology.
No, naturally, see, already you, the Tangent Co. or the Tamil Nadu Generation Company, Tamil Nadu Distribution Company, because they unbundle TNEB, they recruit mechanical engineers, they recruit civil engineers. Because for maintenance of dam and for erection of dams, you need civil engineers. For maintenance of turbines, you need mechanical engineers. And now with the battery and the associated storage, you need chemical engineers. You need physicists. So, and then because of the grid becoming smarter, you need computer science specialists, data science experts, because you need to play around with historical data to ensure that loads are balanced or loads are predicted and controlled. So a whole gamut of experts are required in this sector. So power system as such is interdisciplinary, and a power engineer has to take the expertise of all other experts in order to keep the system floating.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Swapna, we will close if there is no question further. Swapna?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Sir, thank you once again. And it is my pleasure to see you again in
Thank you
the
so much.
screen. And
Nice
sir,
meeting you.
so all the questions, sir, all the questions were nicely answered. And certainly this webinar initiative and this webinar, particularly this webinar series will enhance their knowledge. And if they are faculty, this will help them to go for a better classroom teaching. And if it is a student, certainly this will help them to enhance the knowledge and will help them to do for a very good project. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. We will meet in some other occasions, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swapna.
Welcome, sir.
Dear participants, thank you. Thank you so much for your presence. I hope this webinar might have helped you to enhance your knowledge in future careers. And Chennai Technology has been taking this tireless effort to enhance the knowledge of faculty, researcher, and student community as a social responsibility. So please watch chennai-technology.com or chennai-technology.com/webinar or Chennai Technology in Facebook and Instagram to know more about the forthcoming webinars and to get the knowledge sharing. So we have been conducting so many FTP and conferences and workshops along with the regular webinar series which is being conducted. So today, parallel to this webinar series, there is another one workshop on research scopes on electronics and communication engineering is parallel going on. That will be highly useful for the faculty members of circuit branches to enhance their fundamental knowledges, and students, those who are willing to learn the fundamentals of electronics communication engineering and the research aspects will also be get benefited through this workshop. And on Thursday, there is a very good webinar which is going to be addressed by Dr. Ramesh L. Gaudas, professor from IIT Madras, regarding the tips for how to search the research articles and how to get the recent articles in your inbox. So that is going to be very excellent presentation. So those who it is the circular and I mean the poster has already been into the social media and in our college websites. So you can go for a registration. So this will be highly useful. Highly useful to the faculty members and even students, and not only from the engineering colleges. So this will be highly useful to the arts colleges and science, arts and science colleges and paramedical institutes and any education institute. That means the students and faculty of any education institute and even teachers. It will be useful to teachers also, because nowadays a lot of research articles are being published in educational research. Okay, so this webinar will be highly useful to all the educational community to know about the searching of articles and how to get and how to do the effective search and how to get the recent articles into your inbox. So it will be highly useful. So those who are viewing this webinar, you can share this to your friends or even your teachers. You can be shared to your teachers also, school teachers also. Okay, so in future, publication will play a major role. Okay, and on coming 18th and 19th, for those who are from mechanical and mechatronics, even civil engineering students or civil engineering faculty members can attend the 2 days international seminar on advances in materials and manufacturing. So eminent professors like Dr. Manoj Gupta, Professor of Materials from National University of Singapore, is going to give an expert lecture in the 2 days international seminar, and the professor Dr. Supriyo Kanguli, who is a well-known person in the additive manufacturing and welding from Crankville University, is going to give his expert lecture in this particular 2 days international seminar on advances in materials and manufacturing, has been scheduled, which has been scheduled on 18th and 19th of this month. And apart from that, professors from IITs and NITs are also going to provide their expert lectures in this wonderful forum on 18 and 19. So please keep on watching our ChennaiInstituteOfTechnology.com/webinar or ChennaiInstituteOfTechnology.com or Chennai Institute of Technology in both Facebook and Instagram and Twitter will help you to know about the forthcoming seminars, workshops, and conferences. And as a part of this Knowledge 4.0 webinar series, it is planned to conduct the 2 days international conference on materials and applications on September 25th, 26th of this year. So the those who are from mechanical, manufacturing, mechatronics, and even civil and electronic people also, those who from circuit branches, electrical people. So you can present your publication. So how materials are playing a major role in your particular area of research. In electronic materials, you can present some papers on electronic material also. Okay. So electronic materials, and so you may have transformers and so many equipments in the electrical engineering. So how an effective material can be planned in order to have a better heat transfer efficiency or better heat transfer. Okay, so in electronics materials, you can have when you're designing IC chips. So what material will be the best to take care of the heat? Because in earlier days we had small equipments, very big equipments, because of which there is a lot of possibility of very good heat transfer. Now we are having small equipments or small items which is having the same power rating, but it does more work. Because of that, the heat transfer is very high. So you can suggest some better material for the particular these things, and you can also take part of these conferences. Okay, so all the papers which are accepted will be published in International Institute of Physics Material Proceedings, Institute of Physics, Materials and Science Engineering Proceedings, which is indexed in Scopus and Web of Science. So please make use of these opportunities and make use of this webinar 4.0 series to enhance your knowledge and go for publication. Thank you so much. We will meet in the another one webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you.